Imagine waking up to a sound above your bed, not the creak of old wood, not the wind brushing the roof, but something deliberate, heavy, human. Now imagine realizing that sound is coming from your attic, and worse, whoever is up there isn't supposed to be. This is not a legend, not folklore. This is the true horror of a mother who woke up to discover the intruder in the attic. It was just after dawn in a small Michigan town. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes only in the early hours, when even the birds seem reluctant to break the silence. Inside a modest 2-story house, Rebecca, a single mother, was just stirring awake. Her daughter Emily, only 12 years old, was still fast asleep in the next room. Rebecca had gotten used to the little sounds of the house. At this hour, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the old wall clock, and the occasional pop from the wooden beams adjusting to the cool morning air. But this morning, there was something different. A sound she had never heard before. At first, it was soft, a shuffle, a scrape, something faint above her ceiling. She froze, listening hard, her heartbeat quickening in her chest. Maybe it's just the house settling, she told herself. Maybe a branch brushed the roof. But then it came again, heavier, more distinct. Footsteps. Rebecca sat upright, every hair on her body standing on end. She knew the sound of someone walking slow, careful, trying not to be heard. And they weren't in the yard. They weren't in the hallway. They were above her, in the attic. Rebecca's first instinct was to dismiss it, to cling to the rational explanation: a raccoon, a squirrel, maybe even a stray cat. But as she strained to listen, the truth became undeniable. These weren't animal noises, they were human. One step, then another, deliberate, measured, slow, and then silence. As if whoever was up there knew she had noticed. Her throat tightened. She glanced at the ceiling, as if she could somehow see through the plaster and wood. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her mind racing. How long has he been there? How did he get in? What does he want? But the question that chilled her the most was this: what if he's been here longer than I know? Rebecca stood, her legs trembling beneath her. She walked cautiously toward the hallway, her eyes flicking to Emily's closed bedroom door. A mother's instincts surged to the surface. Whatever was up there, her daughter could not be exposed to it. But then she saw something that made her blood run cold. The attic stairs. They were down. The folding staircase that led to the attic had been pulled from the ceiling. The square hatch gaped open, a dark void staring down into the hallway, and the silence pressing from above was suffocating. Someone had come down, or was waiting just above. Rebecca's first thought was to scream for help. Her second thought was to run. But she knew both options were dangerous. If she screamed, she might provoke whoever was hiding above. If she ran, she risked leaving Emily vulnerable. So instead, she made a decision, a mother's decision. She crept quickly to her daughter's room, quietly opening the door. Emily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" she whispered sleepily. Rebecca pressed a finger to her lips. "Shh. Baby, we need to be very quiet. There's someone in the house." Emily's eyes widened, fear instantly replacing drowsiness. Rebecca took her hand firmly. "We're gonna go downstairs. Slowly, quietly. Don't look up. Don't say a word." The two moved carefully down the stairs. Rebecca's eyes locked on the shadowy attic hatch overhead. Every second felt stretched. Every creak of the floorboards an invitation for the intruder to strike. Once they reached the living room, Rebecca grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "There's someone in my attic. Please send someone now." The dispatcher's calm tone was a lifeline. "Stay on the line with me. Lock your doors. Officers are on the way." Rebecca locked the front door, clutching Emily close. Her ears strained to hear any movement above. For long minutes, there was nothing but silence. But then another step, a slow, deliberate creak, and another. Closer to the hatch, Rebecca held her daughter tighter, her pulse thundering in her ears. The dispatcher's voice urged her to stay calm, but how could she? Someone was above her head. Someone who had crept into her home, lowered the attic stairs, and was now waiting. For what? For who? And just when Rebecca thought she couldn't take another second of suspense, there was a sound. A slow, heavy exhale, coming from the attic, as if the intruder was letting her know he was listening too. When the police finally arrived, Rebecca thought the nightmare would end, but what they discovered in the attic proved this was only the beginning. Red and blue lights flashed against the curtains as 2 patrol cars pulled up outside. Rebecca clutched Emily tighter, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed herself. The dispatcher stayed on the line until the officers entered the house. 2 men in uniform stepped inside, hands resting on their holstered weapons, eyes scanning every corner of the room. Rebecca rushed toward them, her voice trembling. "He's in the attic. I heard him walking. He lowered the stairs. He's up there right now." The officers exchanged a brief look, part skepticism, part concern. One officer, Sergeant Miller, nodded calmly. "Ma'am, we'll check. Just stay here with your daughter." The officers moved cautiously toward the attic hatch. Flashlights in hand, weapons drawn, they stood at the base of the folding stairs. The silence was unbearable. Rebecca and Emily huddled on the couch, watching with wide eyes. Every creak of the officers' boots echoed like thunder. "Police!" Miller called up into the darkness. "If anyone's up there, identify yourself now." Silence. The second officer, Deputy Harris, pulled down the stairs fully and climbed halfway up. His flashlight beam sliced through the gloom. Dust particles floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Rebecca held her breath, gripping Emily's hand so tightly it hurt. Then Harris froze. He swung his light across the far corner of the attic. His voice, usually steady, cracked. "Miller, there's someone here." The second officer climbed up quickly, both beams of light converging on the shadowed corner. And then Rebecca saw it too. A figure, a man, crouched low, pressed into the angle of the roof beams, as still as a spider waiting in its web. His eyes gleamed in the flashlight beam, wide, unblinking, animal-like. Rebecca gasped, covering Emily's eyes. The officer shouted commands, "Hands where we can see them. Don't move." But the man didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just stared, and then he smiled. The officers surged forward, grabbing him by the arms and yanking him into the open. He fought back violently, thrashing like a wild animal. It took both officers, with Rebecca screaming below, to drag the man down the folding stairs. When his feet hit the hallway floor, Rebecca finally saw him clearly. He was filthy. His clothes were tattered, his hair greasy and matted. His skin was pale, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. His eyes darted around the room, wide and manic, but always came back to Rebecca. He looked at her with recognition, as if he knew her, as if he had been watching her. "Who are you?" Rebecca cried, but the man didn't answer. He only grinned wider, his lips cracking. The officers shoved him against the wall, cuffing his wrists tightly. He didn't resist anymore. In fact, he seemed almost pleased. As they dragged him outside, Rebecca clutched Emily tighter, whispering over and over, "It's over, it's over. You're safe now." But as she watched the man being shoved into the back of the police car, a sickening thought crept into her mind. How long had he been up there? And what had he been doing in the attic above their heads? The horrifying discovery: the officers didn't let Rebecca return upstairs until they'd searched every inch of the attic. When they finally called her up, what she saw turned her stomach. There were signs he had been living there. Old blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles, and worse, a small pile of notebooks. Rebecca picked one up with trembling hands. The handwriting inside was erratic, cramped, desperate. She flipped through page after page, her heart pounding as she read. It wasn't nonsense. It was observations, notes about her, her routines, what time she left for work, what time Emily went to bed, even the clothes they wore each day. One line made Rebecca nearly collapse. "She looks beautiful when she sleeps. The daughter too." Rebecca dropped the notebook, covering her mouth in horror. The officers exchanged grim looks. He hadn't just been living in the attic. He had been watching them, studying them, every day, every night, from just a few feet above. Sergeant Miller placed a hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Ma'am, this isn't the first time. We've seen cases like this before. People hiding in homes, surviving in attics or basements. They're called froggers." Rebecca's stomach turned. The term sounded almost innocent. Frogging. But there was nothing innocent about the man's notebooks. Nothing innocent about the way he looked at her. This wasn't just survival. This was obsession. And Rebecca knew if she hadn't heard those footsteps that morning, if she hadn't acted when she did, she and her daughter might never have woken up at all. Rebecca thought the nightmare was over when they dragged the filthy stranger away. But sometimes evil doesn't just vanish when the police drive off. Sometimes the story goes deeper and darker. Part 3, The Stranger's Secret. That night, the house was silent again. Too silent. Rebecca tucked Emily into bed and sat in the living room, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't shake the image of the man's eyes, the way he looked at her, the way he smiled, and those notebooks. Every word she had read replayed in her head. Notes about her life, notes about Emily, notes about what they looked like when they slept. She whispered to herself, trembling, "How long was he up there? How many nights did he watch us without me knowing?" The next morning, Sergeant Miller returned. He sat at Rebecca's kitchen table with a heavy folder in his hands. "Mom," he said carefully, "we've identified him." Rebecca's heart stopped. The man's name was Daniel Harker. He was 38 years old, no fixed address, dozens of trespassing charges. But that wasn't the worst part. Miller slid a mugshot across the table. Rebecca's stomach turned at the hollow eyes staring back at her. Daniel wasn't just a drifter. He was a registered sex offender. Rebecca felt the air leave her lungs. She glanced upstairs toward Emily's room, her mind spinning. Miller continued, his voice steady but grim. "Has been in and out of custody for years. Moves from town to town. Always lurking near schools, parks, family homes. We believe he's been breaking into houses and hiding in them when people are away." Rebecca whispered, "I wasn't just hiding. He was watching us." Miller nodded slowly. "Yes, and based on the notebooks, we think he was planning more." How he got in, the officers searched every inch of the house again. Finally, they found it. Behind the garage. A small window, cracked just enough for someone to squeeze through. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She remembered opening that window weeks ago, airing out the smell of paint when she'd been touching up the walls. She had forgotten to lock it. That one mistake had let a predator into her home. The hidden evidence. Later that day, detectives arrived to catalog the attic. Rebecca tried to stay downstairs, but curiosity and fear pulled her back up. Among the blankets and wrappers, they found something new. A small box. Inside were tiny objects. Innocent things, until you realized where they came from. Emily's hairbrush. A sock from her laundry. One of Rebecca's earrings. A photograph of Rebecca sleeping on the couch. Her knees buckled. The detectives caught her before she collapsed. He hadn't just been watching them, he had been collecting them. Like trophies. Like they already belonged to him. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed that night, unable to close her eyes. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow in the corner felt alive. She thought about Daniel in the police station, his wild eyes, his smile. And then her phone buzzed. The call. It was late. Too late. The caller ID made her blood turn to ice. It was from her own landline phone, the one sitting in the hallway, the one connected to the wall, the one she hadn't touched in days. Her hands shook as she answered. Hello. At first, silence. Then a low, ragged voice. "You shouldn't have found me." Rebecca screamed, dropping the phone. Emily woke upstairs crying. Rebecca ran to her daughter's room, clutching her close, rocking back and forth. The police had taken Daniel away. He was supposed to be locked up. So how was he calling from inside her own house? And that's when Rebecca realized this wasn't over. Not even close. Rebecca thought the nightmare was contained. The police had dragged the intruder away, but evil has a way of slipping through cracks, just like it had slipped into her home. Rebecca held Emily close as the landline continued to buzz in the hallway. She didn't dare pick it up again. She whispered almost to herself, "Hay's in here. He's still in the house." She grabbed her phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher's voice was calm, reassuring. "Ma'am, Daniel Harker is in custody. He hasn't been released." Rebecca almost screamed. "Then how is he calling me?" The missing record. The officers arrived within minutes. They stormed through every room, every closet, every corner of the attic. Nothing. No forced entry. No signs of anyone. But when the sergeant checked the landline, the call record was empty. The phone had never rung. Rebecca felt her chest tighten. She had heard it. She had answered it. And she knew that voice. It wasn't her imagination. The prison break the next day. Rebecca drove Emily to her sister's house an hour away. She couldn't stay another night in that house. Not after that call. As she pulled into her sister's driveway, her phone rang again. It was Sergeant Miller. His voice was different this time, urgent. "Rebecca, you need to sit down." Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What is it?" Miller's voice broke. "Daniel Harker escaped custody last night. The transport van crashed on the way to the county jail. 2 officers dead. He's gone." Rebecca felt her heart stop. "But I heard him last night." There was a pause. "Yes," Miller said grimly. "We think he called you before we even knew he was missing." He hadn't just escaped. He had chosen his next move, and he wanted Rebecca to know. The shadow watching that night at her sister's, Rebecca tried to keep calm. She tucked Emily into bed, sat in the guest room, but sometime after the windows, and after midnight she felt it, that prickling on the back of her neck, the sense that someone was outside. She peeked through the blinds, and there he was, standing across the street, Daniel Harker, his head tilted upward, staring directly at her window. A crooked smile stretched across his pale face. Rebecca screamed, but by the time her sister came running, the street was empty. No footprints. No sign of anyone. Her sister held her, whispering, "It's just your mind. You're traumatized." But Rebecca knew. He was there. He was watching. The note the next morning, Rebecca went to get Emily's backpack from the car. But when she opened the passenger door, her blood froze. A folded note sat on the seat. She picked it up with trembling hands. Written in jagged handwriting were 5 words. "You can't hide from me." He wasn't just watching from the shadows, he was closer. Closer than anyone could imagine. Rebecca thought she could escape him. But evil, it doesn't just follow you. It leaves pieces of itself behind. And in her attic, something far darker was waiting. 2 days later, Rebecca made the hardest decision of her life. She had to go back to the house. Not because she wanted to, but because the police insisted. They needed her to walk through the attic with investigators. The attic that had almost been her grave. She tried to keep her composure as she stepped inside, but the air was heavy. The boards creaked under her feet like they remembered every step Daniel had taken. Her eyes darted to the corner where she had first seen him. But what chilled her most was what the officers found wedged between the insulation and the wooden beams. The hidden journal. It was a notebook. Leather-bound, stained, and cracked from years of wear. The cover read in faded ink, "Property of D.H." Inside were page after page of writings. Not random words, but detailed entries. The first one was dated 5 years earlier, and it was about her. Rebecca felt her stomach turn as she read. "The woman on Blackwood Lane. She leaves her porch light on at exactly 9:13 every night. Her daughter hums before bed. Their dog barks 3 times before going silent. She doesn't know I'm here, but I know everything about her." Her hands shook. This wasn't just obsession. It was years of surveillance. The attic ritual, but the journal wasn't the worst part. Beneath the floorboards they found something else: candles. Burned down to melted stubs. Strange symbols carved into the wood. Small bones arranged carefully in circles. The lead investigator muttered under his breath, "This wasn't just hiding, this was ritual." Rebecca's mind raced. Daniel hadn't just lived in her attic. He had performed something up there. Something twisted. The obsession revealed, flipping further into the journal. She froze at a passage written in jagged, frantic handwriting. "The attic is the heart of the house. I live above them, but one day I'll live within them. The girl hums. Her voice will be mine. The woman fears. Her fear will be mine. Soon they'll never leave me." Rebecca dropped the book. She couldn't breathe. He hadn't just been watching them. He believed he was becoming them. The basement key. But then came the final, most disturbing discovery. Inside a small envelope taped beneath the attic beams was a key. Not to her house, but to her basement. Her blood went cold. The investigators exchanged nervous glances. If he had a key to her basement, how long had he been moving through her house freely? How many nights had he walked beneath her feet while she slept? He wasn't just an intruder in the attic. He was everywhere, and Rebecca was only beginning to learn how deep his obsession truly ran. Rebecca thought the attic was the end of the nightmare, but Daniel had left something deeper, something buried beneath the house, something waiting in the basement. Rebecca hadn't stepped into her basement in weeks. Now, standing with the police at her side, she stared at the door like it was alive. The key they had found in the attic fit perfectly into the lock. Almost too perfectly. The creak of the hinges echoed like a scream as the door swung open. The basement was colder than it should have been. Damp, smelling of iron and mildew. But what made her stomach twist wasn't the smell. It was the sound. A faint humming. Her daughter's lullaby. The hidden room, the officer's flashlights swept across the basement, boxes, tools, cobwebs. But one wall looked wrong. The bricks near the corner didn't match. With a crowbar, they pried it open, and behind it, hidden for who knows how long, was a small, narrow room. Inside were blankets, a lantern, food wrappers, and nailed to the far wall were photographs. Hundreds of them. Rebecca's face, her daughter's face, pictures of them at the park, at the grocery store, even sleeping in their own beds. The tape recorder, but it wasn't just pictures. On a small wooden crate sat an old tape recorder. One officer pressed play. Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. It was her voice. Reading bedtime stories, talking on the phone, singing along to the radio. She realized with horror that Daniel had been recording them for years. Every laugh, every word, every private moment. The final message, but then came the last tape. The voice wasn't hers. It was his, Daniel, and he was whispering, "If you're hearing this, it means you've found me. But I'm not gone. I'm in the house. I'm in the walls. I'm in you. The attic was only my beginning. The basement is my home, and soon I'll be back where I belong." The tape clicked off. The silence was worse than the voice. The impossible question. Rebecca stood frozen. If Daniel was dead or gone, how could he have left this message? When had he recorded it? And why did it sound like he was standing right behind her? She thought the basement held answers. But what it gave her was a warning. One that promised the nightmare wasn't over.